The day I became the most hated man in Lakeside Estates was the same day I became its most powerful. $500. That's what Karen Wellington and her homeowners association charged me for fishing with my grieving daughter. What they didn't know was that I had 4 million reasons to fight back and enough spite to use every single one of them. If you're watching this video from your phone in the bathroom to escape those mind-numbing HOA meetings, drop a comment right now telling me where you're hiding. I guarantee this story will keep you glued to your screen. My name is Remy Thornfra, and until 2 months ago, I was living what most would consider the American dream. I'd spent 15 years building a career in venture capital and financial investment, eventually selling my stakes in several tech startups for enough money to retire at 42. But life has a way of reminding you that money isn't everything. My wife Rachel lost her battle with cancer last year, leaving me to raise our 14-year-old daughter, Solon. The grief nearly destroyed us both. The only thing that seemed to help was fishing, the last activity the three of us had enjoyed together before Rachel's health took its final turn. So, when I decided we needed a fresh start, I specifically looked for a home near water, somewhere peaceful, somewhere we could heal. The Lakeside Estates community seemed perfect on paper. Upscale homes, good schools, and a beautiful 6-acre lake nestled in the center of the development. The realtor mentioned there was a homeowners association, but assured me it was just the standard stuff: lawn maintenance, exterior paint colors, the usual. I should have read between the lines when she hesitated before adding, "The HOA president, Karen Wellington, is dedicated to maintaining property value." I didn't think much of it at the time. I dealt with difficult personalities throughout my career. How bad could one neighborhood bureaucrat be? I found out exactly how bad on a quiet Saturday morning in April. Solon and I had been at the community lake for about an hour, fishing off the small wooden dock. It was the first time I'd seen my daughter genuinely smile in weeks. She'd just caught her second bluegill and was carefully unhooking it when a sharp voice cut through the peaceful morning. "Excuse me, but what exactly do you think you're doing?" The woman approaching us was in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in what looked like expensive athleisure wear, her highlighted blonde hair styled in what I can only describe as the universal "I want to speak to the manager" haircut. She carried a tablet and wore an expression that suggested she just caught us vandalizing public property. "Good morning," I replied, trying to keep my tone friendly. "Just enjoying some fishing with my daughter." I extended my hand. "I'm Remy Thorncraft. We moved into the Sycamore Drive house about 2 months ago." She ignored my outstretched hand completely, instead tapping aggressively on her tablet. "Mr. Thorncraft, fishing is explicitly prohibited in our community lake. This is a direct violation of HOA regulations. I'm Karen Wellington, HOA president." She said this last part as though announcing herself as royalty. "I'll have to issue a violation notice. The fine is $500. I felt Solon freeze beside me. "There must be some mistake," I said calmly. "The realtor specifically mentioned fishing as one of the community amenities. It was a selling point for us." Karen's thin smile didn't reach her eyes. "The regulation was amended last month. All residents were notified via email. Ignorance of the rules doesn't exempt you from following them." She turned her tablet toward me, showing a document with the heading "Amendment to Recreational Use of Community Lake." The date showed it had been approved just 4 weeks earlier. "We never received any notification about this," I protested. "I personally oversee all communications." "The email was sent to every household," Karen replied with absolute certainty. "Perhaps you should check your spam folder, though I can't be responsible for residents who don't bother to read official communications." I felt my jaw tighten but kept my voice level. "May I ask why fishing was suddenly banned? This lake is clearly stocked with fish." I could see several bass swimming near the shallow edges of the water. Karen glanced dismissively at our fishing equipment. "Environmental and safety concerns. The hooks can injure wildlife, and we've had complaints about the smell of fish and bait disturbing residents who are trying to enjoy the lake views from their homes." She looked pointedly at our small tackle box. "Not everyone wants to see this sort of activity while they're having their morning coffee on their patios." Something in her tone made me take a closer look at Karen Wellington. The way she surveyed our modest fishing gear, the slight curl of her lip. This wasn't just about rules. We're being very careful, I said. Solon and I always practice catch and release, and we clean up completely when we're done. Karen's expression hardened. Mr. Thorncraft, perhaps you don't understand how things work here at Lakeside Estates. We maintain certain standards in this community. This isn't a public fishing hole. The residents who've lived here for years expect a particular atmosphere. She glanced at Solon, then back to me. New residents sometimes struggle to adapt to our community culture. People who are more accustomed to, shall we say, different types of neighborhoods. The implication was crystal clear, and I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. I was about to respond when I heard a small sniffle beside me. Solon had tears welling in her eyes. This was supposed to be our healing place. A spot where, for just a little while, she could forget that her mother was gone. And now this woman was ruining it with her thinly veiled condescension. We'll pack up, I said quietly, placing my arm around Solon's shoulders. Please email me the details of the fine and the full updated regulations. Karen's smile returned, victorious. Excellent. I'm glad we understand each other. And do check your email more carefully in the future, Mr. Thorncraft. We wouldn't want any further misunderstandings. She turned and walked away, her designer sneakers hardly making a sound on the manicured grass. As we gathered our equipment, Solon wiped her eyes. Dad, why was that lady so mean? We weren't hurting anything. I didn't have a good answer for her, at least not one that was appropriate to share with a 14-year-old. Some people just like rules more than they like people, sweetheart, I said finally. Let's go home and have some lunch. Later that day, after checking my email, including spam folders and finding no notification about the fishing ban, I started researching our HOA more thoroughly. What I discovered was illuminating. Karen Wellington had been HOA president for 8 consecutive years. Her day job? Owner of a small but exclusive real estate company specializing in luxury community properties. I also found several social media posts from Karen herself, hosting waterfront parties at the very same lake where she'd just find me for fishing. Many of these events featured alcohol and loud music, apparently exempt from the concerns about community atmosphere. Most revealing was a clause buried deep in the HOA documentation. The lake was actually listed as a common property amenity belonging to all residents. There was no legal distinction suggesting the HOA had absolute control over its use. As I looked out my window toward the lake that evening, I saw Karen and what appeared to be a group of friends gathered at a lakeside gazebo, wine glasses in hand, laughing. So, they want to play the rules game, I murmured to myself. Fine. But first, I need to find out who actually owns this piece of water. The following morning, I ran into an older gentleman walking his dog past my house. He introduced himself as Merrick Henderson, a retired attorney who lived 3 doors down. When I mentioned my encounter with Karen Wellington, his friendly expression immediately darkened. Ah, you've met our neighborhood dictator, he said with a grimace. Let me guess, she quoted some obscure regulation and issued a fine. When I nodded, Merrick shook his head. Karen's been running this place like her personal fiefdom for years. Most people just pay the fines and keep their heads down. He glanced around and lowered his voice. If you're interested in some background information, why don't you come by for coffee sometime? I've got quite a collection of HOA horror stories. I took him up on his offer that same afternoon. Merrick's home was filled with law books and framed photographs of what I assumed were former colleagues or clients. Over exceptionally good coffee, he shared what he knew about our community's power structure. Here's what most residents don't realize, Merrick explained, pulling out a folder filled with documents. The lake isn't actually owned by the HOA. It's owned by Meridian Development Corporation, the original developers of this community. They leased recreational rights to the HOA for a 30-year term, which is why Karen and the board can set usage rules. He tapped a document with a highlighted date. That lease expires in less than 2 months. This caught my attention immediately. What happens then? Technically, Meridian could renew the lease, sell the lake outright to the HOA, or find another buyer entirely. Most residents have no idea, they think the HOA owns everything in the community. Merrick leaned forward. But here's where it gets interesting. I've heard through some contacts that Meridian is facing financial difficulties and might be looking to liquidate assets quickly. And our friend Karen knows this. Over the next hour, Merrick and I dug deeper into public records. What we discovered was a pattern of manipulative behavior by Karen that went far beyond petty rule enforcement. Through various shell companies connected to her real estate business, she had been quietly acquiring properties throughout the neighborhood whenever residents were forced to sell, often after being hounded out by excessive HOA fines and violations. And now she's after a bigger game, Merrick concluded. From what I've gathered, she's been in private talks with Meridian to purchase the lake property herself. Not for the HOA, mind you, for her own real estate development company. Word is she plans to reduce lake access and build additional luxury homes on part of the shoreline. This explained the sudden fishing ban. It wasn't about environmental concerns at all. It was about gradually restricting lake usage to prepare for a complete change in ownership. Merrick introduced me to another ally, Samuel Washington, a retired local bank owner and one of the few residents who openly opposed Karen's leadership. Samuel, an elegant African-American man in his 60s, had experienced Karen's subtle discrimination firsthand. Samuel invited us to his study the following evening, where he revealed a meticulously maintained database tracking HOA activities over the past decade. I started this as a simple record-keeping exercise, he explained, gesturing to his computer screen filled with spreadsheets. But it quickly became apparent that there was a pattern to Karen's enforcement actions. The data was undeniable. Homeowners of color received violation notices at nearly 3 times the rate of their white neighbors. New residents were cited for infractions that long-standing homeowners routinely got away with. Properties that eventually sold at below-market rates due to compliance issues frequently ended up in the hands of shell companies with connections to Wellington properties. Karen's real estate operation is clever, Samuel explained, pulling up property records. She never purchases directly. Instead, she uses a network of LLCs, Lakeside Investments, Wellington Holdings, Sierra Vista Properties, all ultimately tracing back to her but obscured enough to avoid obvious connection. He showed me documentation of 6 different homes that had been purchased this way over the past 5 years, all following the same pattern: excessive HOA violations, declining property values, desperate sales, and eventual high property resales after cosmetic renovations. Merrick nodded grimly. The lake is her endgame. Meridian Development has been struggling since the recession. They overextended on commercial properties and have been quietly liquidating residential assets to cover debts. The lake was never meant to be permanent green space. The original development plan from 30 years ago actually included lakefront condominiums, but environmental regulations at the time prevented construction. Those regulations have since been relaxed, Samuel added. With the right connections at City Hall, which Karen certainly has, permits could be issued for limited development. A half-dozen luxury lakefront homes could easily bring in $7 or $8 million in revenue. My professional interest was piqued. Tell me more about Meridian's financial situation, I said. As a former venture capitalist, I was well versed in recognizing distressed assets and opportunity. Over the next few days, Samuel connected me with former banking colleagues who provided discreet insights into Meridian's precarious position. The company had taken on substantial debt financing a commercial development that had fallen through when anchor tenants pulled out during the pandemic. Their credit lines were maxed, and they were quietly selling off land holdings to avoid bankruptcy. The lake property, valued at roughly $300,000, was one of their few remaining unencumbered assets. Meanwhile, Merrick had been quietly arranging small gatherings with other disgruntled residents. We met in rotating locations, sometimes at Samuel's home, sometimes at the local library's private rooms, once even in the back room of a sympathetic resident's bakery shop. The stories shared a disturbing pattern. She cited me for excessive holiday decorations the day after I spoke against her at the town council meeting. James Morris, a retired teacher, told our small group. I've had the same Christmas lights for 15 years, but suddenly they violated some obscure brightness ordinance. My foster children were banned from the community pool for being too loud, shared Maria Gonzalez, a healthcare worker whose 3 foster kids had been swimming when Karen's grandchildren wanted to use the pool. When I asked which rule they had broken, she said it was her executive decision as HOA president. Diana Winters, a young widow who had moved to the community just before me, described how Karen had personally led an inspection committee through her backyard, claiming to check for mosquito breeding grounds. 2 days later, I received violation notices for 5 different issues, all things that my neighbors have but weren't cited for. When I pointed this out, Karen suggested that perhaps this community isn't the right fit for someone in my situation. Each story revealed Karen's tactical approach: isolate potential opposition, apply selective pressure through HOA mechanisms, and either force compliance or drive people out. Those who stayed learned to keep their heads down. Those who fought back found themselves facing escalating harassment. Through these meetings, we identified potential allies throughout the community. Samuel created a secure messaging group where residents could share experiences and information without fear of retaliation. We were building what amounted to an underground resistance within our own neighborhood. I also began researching Karen's personal financial situation. As an investor, I knew how to read between the lines of property records and business filings. What I discovered surprised me. Despite her carefully cultivated image of success, Wellington Properties was highly leveraged. Karen had taken out multiple lines of credit against her existing properties, likely to maintain her lavish lifestyle and fund her attempts to acquire new properties. If the lake development plan falls through, she'll be in serious financial trouble, I explained to Merrick and Samuel during one of our strategy sessions. She's not just doing this for profit. She's doing it out of necessity. Based on these financial records, she's overextended. The lake development isn't just an opportunity for her, it's financial survival. This information changed our calculus. We weren't just facing a neighborhood tyrant. We were dealing with someone fighting for her economic life. That made her more dangerous but also more vulnerable. At Samuel's suggestion, I also reached out to Robert Chen, a real estate broker who had insider knowledge about the lake property and the local market. We met at a coffee shop 20 miles away to ensure privacy. Karen's been trying to put together financing to purchase the lake property for about $300,000, Robert confirmed, keeping his voice low. Meridian Development is in financial freefall and needs to close quickly. They've given her a 60-day exclusive negotiation period, but they're so desperate that they might accept a better offer if it came with immediate payment. Robert also revealed something even more interesting. Karen's real estate empire is mostly smoke and mirrors at this point. Wellington Properties looks impressive on paper, but she's leveraged to the hilt. She's been using her HOA connections and social network to maintain the appearance of success, but the truth is she's about 3 bad months away from serious trouble. That's why she's so aggressive about this lake deal. She needs a big win to keep her creditors at bay. With this information, I began formulating a plan.